Well, I don't quite know what that was, and I got to apologize once again. And if you ever thought the show was pre-scripted, planned, organised, that once again shows you that we have absolutely no idea what we're doing here on the Circus of Safety. But anyway, good morning, welcome, and good to have you here. Des, mate, how are you today, fella?
I'm good. I'm recovering a bit from last week with the Bright Star Health and Safety Conference. It was a busy time.
Busy time, and also a number of behind-the-scenes recordings, you and me. I don't know where Andy was, supposedly taking the day off or something.
Maybe you found some work. I don't know. Andy, what have you got to say for yourself?
I was working.
That's all right.
Consultants like me are the glue that hold the framework of health and safety together in this country.
We know you and I hold this show up, mate, and Andy just wafts in, wafts out. Supposedly he's working today, but truth be told, that'll be told by our audience numbers. And this morning we have got a special guest because we are going out there today, and we'll explain a bit more shortly. But good morning to you, Jeff.
Hi, fellas. Nice to be here. We've had Mike Cosman out doing the radio and the telly, but I said, give me the hardest hitting interviews, give me the most prestigious show. And he said no, so here I am.
He's going to fit right in.
I'm glad we're on the same page around expectations, because you can see already I've dropped the ball once this morning, and that won't be the last, I'm sure. So Jeff, listen, you may not appreciate this, but we've got one international listener out of Perth, which makes us international. Now, while most people will know who you are, that one listener out of Perth may not. So you just want to give the audience, well, that one member, an overview of just who you are and what you do, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Okay, so this is directed to Des's mum. I'm Jeff Sissons. I'm the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Institute of Safety Management. I've been in the gig for about a year now. I've worked as a health and safety professional. I'm very slowly doing my master's in health and safety at Vic. But my background is as primarily an employment lawyer and a public lawyer. So worked as the general counsel at the CTU for between 2012 and 2017. Worked in the Beehive as a ministerial advisor to the Minister of Workplace Relations for 3 years. So have seen different angles of the system, and yeah, looking forward to it.
You sound like a real lawyer. Des professes to be one from time to time. So are you actually a real lawyer?
I'm not at the moment. I handed back my practicing certificate when I took this gig. So no, none of what I say should be taken as legal advice at this point. It's really just waffle now.
I just got a text from my mum. She thinks Jeff's a lovely young man. So good effort, Jeff.
Go Des' mum. Fantastic, Jeff. Now, look, great to have you on the show, and thanks for drawing the short straw and joining us today. Andy, real quickly, mate, how's our young apprentice doing?
I don't know. I haven't seen him. I've been too busy out working.
Pull the other one. Okay, listen, let's get into it. We've got a big show today. Des, really quickly, mate, can you just cover us off with our disclaimer, please?
I didn't write a disclaimer. I haven't had the time.
What do you mean you haven't had the time to write a disclaimer?
Well, I've taken a side hustle. I'm working in a call center, and I just haven't had the time.
You've time's that tough. You've taken a side hustle.
Hang on, so I've got a call coming in now. Just bear with me. Hello, traffic cone hotline. Oh, you've had a complaint made against you. Oh, you followed advice from the Circus of Safety. Yeah, you shouldn't act on anything they say. It's not safety or legal advice. So just how many traffic cones do you have? Oh, you need fewer than that. No, fewer still. Fewer. Are you a small business? Yeah, you can halve that number. Okay, then. Okay, bye-bye. Sorry about that, guys.
Is your side hustle the traffic cone hotline?
Hey. Oh, could you? Oh, sorry about that.
You didn't mute yourself, man.
How embarrassing.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Great. Now, real you paid per call or per traffic cone that you reduced? Oh, we'll keep that one quiet.
It's top secret, mate.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, Jeff. I do apologize. I was just telling you how great the disclaimers were. And then Des didn't write one.
Very
Awesome.
good.
Okay. Well, Jeff, listen, it's that time of the show. We're going to bring up the spinning wheel of death. No doubt you're very familiar with it. Super excited. There's a load of topics on the wheel. And now, are we all ready for the wheel to spin?
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
Fantastic. Here we go. What do you know? Oh my
What are the
God.
chances?
What are the chances? What are the chances?
What are the chances? Regulatory safety reform. I mean, absolutely. Jeff, I don't think we could have organised this absolutely any better than that, right? Mate,
Amazing.
listen, you're the guest. Firstly, regulatory safety reform. First few things that come flooding to your mind, mate.
So we've had this jamboree of health and safety announcements this week from the minister, and you know, I've given the minister credit publicly and privately for actually getting out and talking to health and safety folk and real people about health and safety last year. But let's be honest. I feel like most of the announcements have gone down like a cup of cold sick with health and safety professionals. I think some have been glad that it's just been a cup rather than a mug of cold sick. There's a few I think have pretended that it's a smoothie, but let's be real. These changes are going to hold us back when we should be going forward.
Wow. Tell it how it is, Jeff. Tell it how it is, mate.
So poor health and safety costs us 4.9 billion a year as a country, and if we're really serious about economic growth, we should be improving our health and safety outcomes, not cutting back on health and safety.
I will bounce around to the others, but I mean, wasn't that the purpose of the reform, to kind of improve, make things better, streamline things?
My worry about these reforms, and hopefully we get into the details a bit, is that by focusing on the cost of compliance rather than on the cost of harm, we're being penny wise and pound foolish. We're not saving money as a country if we don't improve our health and safety performance. And I'm really worried that some of these things are going to take us backwards.
Now, Jeff, we shamelessly don't deny we use ChatGPT for a lot of our material. Mate, you're coming up with some banger one-liners. Is that Jeff Sissons natural, or is that ChatGPT?
All natural. NZISM runs on a shoestring, so I can't afford the ChatGPT subscription.
Nice. We can pirate you a copy if you want. I mean, sorry, I didn't say that on air. My apologies. There's regulatory safety reform, the topic that is, I mean, listen, also, let's be fair. You put a number of topics on the wheel. They never land. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Just absolute frustration. You know, I've been on the show how long now? 18 months, 2 years. Jeff's on once, he gets his topic. Mine are sitting back in the ether somewhere. I don't know what's going
on. If I were you, I would take it personally. Andy, regulatory safety reform. Your thoughts, concerns, initial words of wisdom?
Perhaps I'm slightly perhaps I'm slightly more cynical than the others on the panel.
Sorry, Andy. Are you a little bit emotional about this?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think if you look at it through the lens of this being purely politics, it makes perfect sense. But that's possibly me being a little bit overly cynical. But it's been interesting looking at the response from the safety professionals, like surprised that a politician is playing politics. You know, if you go and order your coffee in the morning, are these safety professionals really surprised when the barista starts making coffee? When they take the car to the mechanics, are they surprised that the mechanic starts fixing the car? You know, a politician does what a politician does, and that's, if you look at this through that lens, it all makes perfect sense.
What other lenses there to look at it through, Andy?
Well, she's a politician, so she possibly wants to change the world. But to do that, she's got to be in power. And to be in power, she's got to win votes. And as we've seen from globally, you win votes by little snippets that appeal to you, to the people that might vote for you. And I can't imagine that many safety professionals vote for ACT. So it's not really on their agenda. It's not their target audience.
Can you hurry up?
Safety professionals tend to be left of centre, I would suggest. I don't know, maybe.
So Jeff, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What would you say if those out there that are looking at these reforms going, wow, exciting news, great news, and we will get into the detail shortly. What are your thoughts if they turn around and said, well, those of you complaining are just a bunch of health and safety professionals who are clearly milking this industry. In fact, she called it out, right? There's an entire industry based around this stuff. You're just worried that you're going to lose your jobs and be made redundant. What do you say to them?
First thing I'd say to them is that, we knew that this reform was coming because it was in the coalition agreement. So we got a bunch of folks together who aren't just safety professionals. In the room, we had the EMA, Business New Zealand, CTU, so the employers, the unions, the heads of all the major safety professions, and the heads of all the major high-risk industries, and said, what do we agree on? What do we think is going to shift the needle in terms of health and safety outcomes? And I was really surprised by how much everybody in the system agreed on this stuff. We wrote a joint letter that was signed by both Catherine Rich and Richard Wagstaff, plus Hassan's NZISM, and supported by pretty much the whole health and safety system. Health and safety shouldn't be an issue that is a political football because people's lives are at stake. That's what we learnt from Pike River, and it feels to me like this is tragedy replaying as farce a little bit. But I wonder if the government should reflect on what happens when another tragedy happens, and it's seen that they've undermined the health and safety system.
Some good points there. Andy, you peddle snake oil. What are your concerns or thoughts on that comment that this is just the people complaining, the people making the biggest noise or the biggest stink about these proposed changes are just those that benefit from them financially?
Well, again, that's politics. That's how you play the game. That's how you get votes. You segregate people and you put they're the enemy. The health and safety professionals are the enemy. We're in it for small businesses. Look what we've done for small businesses. Look, if you vote for us again, look what we can do next time. And that's what it is. If you look at it through a political lens, it all makes perfect sense.
Are you suggesting that we should form a political party like the McGilly, what are those guys with the kilts?
Serious. The other thing I'd say, Brenton, is that we, if you read our submission to the Minister's reform process, one of the big things that NZISM's been pushing for and health and safety professionals have been pushing for is lifting the game of health and safety professionals. Let's make this into a proper profession. Let's make it so that we drive the cowboys out. Because I do think we need to look at ourselves in the mirror here, but I also think most of the people I talk to want to do a great job in terms of keeping people safe. So let's put that stuff in place. That's not a self-interested turkeys not wanting to vote for Christmas position, but the minister doesn't seem to have listened to that yet. There's more water to come under the bridge, and we'll keep pushing for that. But we want health and safety to be more of a profession than it is now.
Yeah, no, love the way you rounded that out, Jeff, because I think it is important that the general public, because we do have people in operations roles that listen to this show. We got a range of an audience, and I think it's important to understand that a lot of safety professionals don't want us to be relied upon to keep people safe, right? And we are constantly striving to improve the advice that we offer and give and help people understand that. But hey, let's jump into some of these proposed. And I'm going to, Jeff, you're probably closer to a real lawyer than our resident Des there. But would it be correct in referring to them as proposed reforms at this point in time?
Yeah, it's kind of I've heard it referred to as a roadmap. Basically, this is where the minister wants to go. She'll need to get cabinet to agree to actual detailed policies. Some of them I think this month, some of them next month, and some of them later on in the piece. So there's a bit of water to go under the bridge here, and hopefully, I'm hoping that cabinet will look at the response from the stakeholders and public and maybe rethink some of these. But we'll see. But people don't have to worry now that they have to comply with the announcements. The law needs to be passed, and I'm expecting that.
Yeah, so probably a great clarification. Small business owners, don't run out and burn the Health and Safety at Work Act just yet, because as Jeff's pointed out, this is a roadmap. These are ideas. These are suggestions that she's looking to move through Parliament, and they haven't been moved through Parliament, and also they haven't been enacted into the legislation. Well, okay, so I did a bit of research. I was quite impressed with the amount of prep I've done for the show. Not that we were expecting it to land on regulatory safety reform. I mean, the odds of that happening this week of all weeks is just still blowing my mind. But one of the parts of the roadmap or the suggested reforms is around trying to reduce compliance for small or low risk businesses around, and the way that it's proposed that occurs is kind of making them exempt from some of or a number of the general requirements under the Health and Safety at Work Act. I'm going to jump to Des. He's been a bit quiet. Des, your one word for the show. What are your thoughts to that proposed change?
It's an interesting one because if Andy's talking about sort of playing the political game, the minister's obviously tapped into some sort of sentiment there, and if she is playing the political game, that's gaining mileage for her. So why is that? Why is there that sentiment within the small business community? And I think there's an opportunity for safety to reflect on itself and think, well, why are small businesses feeling this pressure to comply and go through extra steps just to, facilitate a retail shop that sells clothing? Like, what I personally can't ever see that having been an issue. I don't think, there's been some comments that clothing shops shouldn't have to deal with critical risks and things like that. Well, I don't think anyone ever thought that they did. So where's that sentiment coming from? That's my question.
Snake oil salesmen, pre-purchased health and safety manuals. I don't know. I could probably rattle off I mean, that's I mean, Andy, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, around exempting low risk or small businesses. I'm sure you got plenty of thoughts on this.
Yeah, I have got loads of thoughts on this. I find it interesting. I haven't had a chance to go through and analyze it all in as much detail, but the concept of low risk I find interesting when reading through the various different documents. And it's okay, so what is a low risk business?
Here we go.
So in my mind, a low risk business would be a business without critical risk. Because if it's got critical risk, clearly it's not low risk. Now, in the document, it says that low risk businesses only have to focus on critical risks. But by default, if a low risk business hasn't got critical risks, therefore the small business doesn't have to do anything. Now, if that's the intent, I think there's a better way of saying it. But it doesn't make, that whole thing doesn't make any sense to me. It's absurd. Like, how can you have a low risk business that's got critical risks? It's just, what? That's nonsensical. But that's what's underpinning this whole piece. And that's why I haven't gone much further than that, because I keep going around in circles with it. And then in the fact sheet that accompanies the statement, where it tries to give some detail about defining what a critical risk is, and credit to people for trying to define what it is, because it's hopelessly difficult to define. The definition doesn't make any sense either. It just reinforces my argument. So
and that's why they should have gone to the Circus of Safety's dictionary on definitions, right?
Oh, absolutely. They jumped on the show and said, what do you guys think? And we think it's absurd. Don't do it. But how many people in the electorate would analyse it to the extent that we have or I have? As a headline, there's only critical risk. We haven't got any critical risk. We don't have to do anything. But it's sort of, the truth is hiding beyond the bluster, and then it becomes an even bigger problem when you are playing around with multiple PCBU situations. So you've got a small, low-risk business that's working with a bigger business. How does that pan out? That makes no sense either.
Well, mate, a friend of the show, Keith Harvey, tends to agree with you with his statement here that there is nothing collectively accepted by any industry in New Zealand to define high, low, or I guess you got a bit excited there. But yeah, so that's kind of I know something you keep rabbiting on about is how do we define that? How are we going to define low risk? And already the definitions or the terms being used in the statements are contradicting themselves. I mean, Jeff, your thoughts on that first proposed change there around trying to extract low risk or small businesses from general duties under the Health and Safety at Work Act?
So I've been doing health and safety since 2012, and that's long enough to remember the last time we tried to exempt small, low-risk businesses from was the worker participation duties under the Health and Safety at Work Act.
Yep.
And fair to say that turned into a farce quite quickly, because the minister decided that he was going to exempt dairy farming and beef farming as low-risk industries. He set the line in terms of ACC injuries just above those. Unfortunately, set it just below worm farming, so he got pulled off by nearly everybody for the high-risk worm farms and low-risk beef farms. So, what's high risk, what's low risk? That's a political question, and I'm really worried that we exempt small, quote unquote, low-risk businesses from. It's not just only focusing on critical risks. I think it's a little unclear, but it seems like the minister wants to exempt them from things like worker engagement and participation. You don't need to talk to your workers about the health and safety measures that you're going to take. I worry quite a lot about this. This is probably my number one worry in terms of the measures that have been announced so far. I do have a lot of empathy for small businesses. NZISM is a small organisation, probably a small low-risk business in terms of the Act. I think that a lot of small businesses, their owner-operators, they're working 60, 70 hours a week. They're trying to get all of their, they're trying to comply with tax law, they're trying to comply with employment law, they're trying to comply with health and safety law. They're stressed and having another thing to worry about. I understand that stress, but I don't think that we fix their health and safety problems by saying do less. I think we fix their health and safety problems by saying, here's how you do it. Here's how you keep people safe. Here's guidance. Here's information, and deliver it in a way that doesn't require them to read a 100-page piece of guidance.
Jeff, I mean, you probably picked up pretty quick early on that I'm the dim-witted one of the show, right? I ain't no a smart academic, but my understanding of how the law and our expectations should be interpreted right now is that it should be proportionate to the size, nature, and risk of your organisation, right? So my stupid, dumb-witted question is is it this already happening? Like, not necessarily exempt, but aren't the expectations placed on small or low-risk businesses proportionate to the level of risk? Shouldn't that already be happening out there?
And maybe we need to do a better job of communicating that. In the minister's first announcement, she said, I know that business owners and lawyers have been kept up late at night worrying about the definition of what's reasonably practicable. Now, I've done both of those gigs, and I never lost a wink of sleep worrying about what reasonably practical means. I think it's quite clear, and I think it does. When you're looking at what's reasonably practicable, you need to think about the availability of the ways of addressing the risk, the suitability of their controls, and weigh those up with the cost. And what we expect of our biggest businesses is probably slightly different from what we expect of our smallest businesses.
Great. So maybe I'm not as dim-witted as I thought I was. Fantastic. Des, I mean, your thoughts? I mean, shouldn't we be doing things already proportionate to the size, nature, scale, risk of what we're involved with?
I think we should be, and we have been. And assuming we know what the words critical risk means, those words have been on the lips of the safety profession for decades now. There's nothing new about that. So I don't know. I'm not really sure what this renewed focus on critical risks and shifting that priority away from small businesses, I'm really not sure what that's aiming to achieve, to be honest.
Can I jump in on that, Brenton?
Yeah, go for it, Jeff. Yeah.
Really, the minister's also said that she wants to focus the whole of the health and safety system, the Health and Safety at Work Act, on what are critical risks. And there's two risks that she basically ruled out in the post-CAB press conference. She said clothing shops won't need to worry about psychosocial risks. And then later on, she said small business, low-risk businesses who've got workers working from home don't need to worry about the ergonomic risks and the fancy computer setup for their staff. So musculoskeletal harm is the number one cause of harm in New Zealand. WorkSafe's done some good research that says we lose about 3 times as many disability-adjusted life years than we do to all acute injuries. Psychosocial harm is number 2, and we lose about twice as many disability-adjusted life years as we do to those acute harms. And WorkSafe's done some really good research on work-related suicide, where they trawled through all of the coronial reports for 5 years. They looked at about 1,200 of them, and of those 1,200, about 200 they deemed to be significantly work-related suicides. So that's 40 deaths a year that aren't turning up on WorkSafe statistics, where people have been driven to suicide by their work, or it's a major contributing factor. So to say those 2 things, musculoskeletal risks and psychosocial risks, they're out, they're not critical risks, that seems to me that you're not following the evidence there. So we're going to push the minister and we're going to push the government to have a definition of critical risks that actually meets what we're trying to address here. Because you lose credibility and you hurt the system when you rule those things out.
What one has to be wondering where or who's been advising, because we've got to acknowledge, right, the minister is being advised, and no doubt is taking that advice and then with their media personnel managing that. You do have to wonder, are those people providing her with advice registered safety professionals through such organisations as NZISM? And one may suggest possibly not. And I guess that's the risk that they take, right, when they start trying to justify these changes, which, to be fair, I still can't see what the change here is, and they start throwing out examples. They've got to be so careful that they're not contradicting themselves, which in this case clearly sounds like they are. We've got a number of other kind of changes come through, so I think I might jump onto the next one and let's just have a quick look at that and see what we think. There's a bit of a interesting conversation happening in the chat group. So if you're tuning in, don't forget to jump into LinkedIn and you too can be part of the conversation. I'll jump onto some of those shortly. But one of the other changes, and I know, Andy, this is dear to our hearts, having spent a number of years facilitating outdoor pursuit-based activities and taking groups and individuals onto private land to participate in these activities. I know it's been thrashed a little bit to death recently over the recent Whakaari White Island court case, and that's all been across the media. But landowners will no longer be legally responsible for health and safety risks associated with recreational activities occurring on their land. Go, Andy, go.
Well, I would suggest that maybe they're not already, because this is complicated. I actually engaged Des to help me with a piece of work around this, and it was related to Section 37 of the Act, which is particularly, I think, Part B, which was to do with farming and the farming exemption. So the idea being that on a farm, it's only a workplace if there's work happening. So when the sweet corn is growing, it's not a workplace. But as soon as you start actively doing anything on it, it is. And one of my clients is a forestry management company, and we asked the same question. When a forest, it almost becomes quite philosophical. When a tree is growing, is it a workplace? And then the whole question was, and Des did some tremendous research into this, is a forest a farm? And the general consensus that from Des's advice, I know he's not a proper lawyer.
I was going to say,
correct me here. Correct me here, Jeff. But it was that it's probably not. But then the absurd thing was, on the other side of the fence where the forest is, the farmer decided to grow a little plantation. Yet his trees, when they're growing, weren't a workplace. And why were we doing this work? We were doing this work to understand the responsibilities towards hunters on the forest. And I think expanding that farm section, or that concept of it's only if work's going on, would be really good. And that would be really helpful for Department of Conservation as well, I think. It would just clear up that quite nicely. So I'm quite in favour of that. I'm not sure what the unintended consequences of that may be, but I was quite happy to read that.
That got quite deep all of a sudden, Andy. If a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, do you have to notify?
Absolutely. Oh, it's beautiful. That's the sort of level of safety that I like to talk about, that philosophical level.
That's because you just waffle on selling snake oil, mate. I mean, Jeff, well, actually, I'll come back to you in a minute, Jeff. So let's just go to the guy that did the research. Is a forest to forest? What are you rabbiting on about, mate? Do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit on what Andy was trying to articulate?
To be honest with you, I barely remember it. I wrote it down and sent it to Andy and duly forgot about it.
I paid you for it.
There's definitely a theme and a sentiment that we need more clarity, and I don't think anyone disputes that. And I think if I draw in another theme here, I think the safety profession has been branded as a barrier to clarity rather than the facilitators of clarity, and I think that's misguided. I think there's very clear direction. Jeff mentioned the joint letter to the minister. Very clear direction and enthusiasm to provide clarity in health and safety management and health and safety law. And yet we've been branded as the barrier to that. And I think that's misguided.
Well, let's just be clear. I think it's snake oil salesmen like Andy that are being branded. But Jeff, just over to you as we wrap up this sort of topic. So I'm cognizant we've got a number of others that we want to touch on. Again, my ignorance. Landowners, adventure enthusiasts, outdoor groups, multiple PCBUs, arguably overlapping duties. Wouldn't all this stuff be sorted out with clear conversations around, hey, this is what I'm taking responsibility, and isn't that technically already happening? So I'm still struggling to understand what significant changes here, apart from providing some clarity around it, really.
Yeah, this is a loyally answer, but I think the devil's going to be in the detail here of seeing what actually changes. I think possibly this change is a good idea, but it's probably one that's been clarified by the decision in White Island Management Limited. So we'll watch this one with interest.
Yeah, no, great. Hey, listen, just want to jump across. First-time commentator, I guess. Is that the word we'd use to describe this? Sarah there jumping in. The expectation is already low. And I guess just referring back to one of the earlier topics where we were talking about the first sort of change around reducing compliance to small business. In the unregulated wellness industry where I've worked for 20 years, the biggest issue is the HS isn't even on their radar. It's definitely not keeping me up at night. I'm on a board for a commercial. Oh, I can't read that. Cult recovery. There's an issue of not enough oversight, definitely not too much. So again, I think it's interesting. I guess it's all about perspective, right? And that's where Keith jumps in and is talking about clarity or consensus of interpretation. Interesting though, Robert Macaulay, we're going thick and fast here on the chat, but he jumped in and suggests that maybe, and I'm taking this out of context, so apologies, Robert. He responded to another comment on the page there, but his thoughts are that maybe HASWA is okay. It's the supporting materials that needs to be completed. And I think that's kind of almost where, what we're semi-alluding to. There are a number of highly skilled individuals out there that can help provide clarity, and that's what Des was saying. Those individuals have been tarnished as the barriers.
I think it's from that. Can I jump in there? And I won't take too long.
No, go for it.
The idea behind a health and safety system like ours, a Robins model, is you set general duties up in the legislation, and then you, through regulations and guidance, you set what those expectations are on an industry basis. That's the whole point of the Robins model. And because we haven't done that, because we have incomplete regulations, and because we don't have good guidance, it just pushes everything back onto advisors and individuals to work out how to deal with these risks. It's an incomplete system, and that's what's driving a lot of these problems, including health and safety professionals having to reinvent the wheel as they come into all these businesses.
One of the other topics we got on the spinning wheel of death, Jeff, is safety in New Zealand just what it is. And I'm starting to think, just honing in on what you're saying there, we've taken the traditional she'll be right attitude when it comes to applying our Health and Safety at Work Act, right? I should be right. We've got it. Slap it up. Let's get on with it, right? Like putting the clips under your jandal from the bread packet when your jandal breaks, right? So, but anyway, nonetheless, let's kind of jump on. One of the other statements that have come out this week, which is fascinating. But the minister suggests legislation will be introduced to clarify the distinction between health and safety governance responsibilities, as in for directors and boards, and as against the day-to-day operational management of a business, i.e. for the managers. Once again, I'm no expert here, clearly, but I thought that was relatively clear. But Jeff, your thoughts on this?
Again, it sounds sensible, but one of the things I'm worried about here is under the old Health and Safety and Employment Act, a director wasn't liable unless they participated in or acquiesced to the breach. So they had to know about it, they had to take part in it. And what that incentivized was people not wanting to know about health and safety and what was going on, because they limited their own liability by doing it. When we spoke to the Aussies at the time, they said the most important thing in the model law is those directors' due diligence obligations. And I think that's been our experience since we introduced the Health and Safety at Work Act. Directors knowing that they had to understand health and safety and resource it properly, at least in the big end of town. I think that's been the main driven improvements in health and safety. So anything that says, don't worry about health and safety, don't hear about it, the CEO deals with it and you don't have to worry about it, I think that's going to drive worse practice. I get the classical management governance split, but health and safety is too important to say hands off and don't worry about it.
Yeah, and I think that's where we end up with gaps, right? When we get too prescriptive about you're on this side of the fence, you're on that side of the fence, because unfortunately, while the legislation may be black and white when printed, it's not the way the world works, right? Damn, that was good. I'm glad this is recorded. I need to write that down. Directors will focus on governance and strategic oversight, reducing overcompliance and duplicated efforts between directors and management. Management. I mean, your thoughts on this proposed change? I mean, do you see much difference to the way the law is being managed now? I mean, what are your initial thoughts?
I think there's an opportunity to create some confusion with this, because an officer who has due diligence obligations under the Health and Safety at Work Act is not always exactly the same thing as a director who's going to be responsible for governance. So a director typically is an officer, but an officer might also extend into the C-suite. And we seldom see officers in the C-suite prosecuted under officer due diligence laws. We saw one very high-profile one late last year, but most of those prosecutions are actually from small business owners who are both owners and managers and probably workers as well. So I don't anticipate that reform in this space is going to add clarity. I think it'll probably add confusion.
Yeah. Andy, I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, you fall into that space, right? Where you're the worker, the director, and the manager, right? What are you worried about?
I think
you don't actually do a lot of work, so I consider you low risk,
this is
right?
true. I think Des has alluded to a good point there. Like, how many businesses in New Zealand is there actually clear separation between the governance and the management? And I would say it's very, very few. I mean, those are the big players. The vast majority of New Zealand businesses, it's the same people. And actually by creating this division between the two, it's not helpful for your small and medium enterprises where he's the operator, or he or she is the operator, the worker, the supervisor, the manager, and the owner. For 90% of New Zealand businesses, there's just massive overlap there. At corporate level, absolutely, I get that. But for small, medium businesses, which is most of New Zealand, it's just going to cause more confusion.
Yeah, no. I'm struggling to understand what's different to the current requirements. But
I mean, to Des's point, and get out your tiny violins here, the people who should be worried about this change are the chief executives and the others in the C-suite. because they're going to have responsibility for the day-to-day management. Their boards are going to say, oh no, we're just worried about the strategy. And the question of resourcing, the question of elevating health and safety risks, all that stuff becomes harder for them.
Yeah. Andy, I'm cognizant of time, and we may, if Des and Jeff's time allows, go a little bit beyond 9, but I know you've got to drop off because apparently you've got to work. Increasing certainty about compliance was one of the other announcements that were made this week, and that's going to be done by introducing, working on or introducing what was referred to as safe harbours through approved codes of practice to address the demand, I guess, for clearer guidance on what constitutes reasonably practicable. Your thoughts before you have to head away?
This is interesting. I think, if I recall correctly, that this was actually a suggestion by the task force way back before the 2015 legislation, and I think it was a great. I think then it had significant merit, and I still think it does. This idea of having sort of collaborative groups that provide the information that people need is a sensational idea, and it would ensure more ownership as well, as opposed to having more stuff imposed on you by WorkSafe. It would be more inclusive, and I think that's a positive thing, absolutely positive thing.
Oh, great, Des. I mean, you're advising in-house, hopefully not on legal matters, but occupational health and safety matters. I mean, what are your thoughts on this proposed suggestion of change, reform?
I don't know where all this is coming from. Just be careful. I might accuse you of being a friend. Bloody hell. I think the reform as a whole, I don't know. It's difficult to digest. We've across the ditch. We've got 7 different jurisdictions.
Come on, Des. Come on.
Des is out. Des is out the water. He's floundering like a fish.
We've got 7 different jurisdictions, all of which can teach us a lesson. We've got the UK, which can teach us a lesson, and we don't seem to be willing to learn any of those lessons.
Jeff, your thoughts, mate? What can you do to bring some common sense to this group?
On the one hand, more guidance is a great idea. Most of WorkSafe's guidance is out of date. We, as I was talking about earlier, telling people how they can comply with their health and safety duties in a good way is a great idea. So we advocated for it. The joint leader advocated for it. We've supported it when the minister announced it. My only caveat really is that if you make the safe harbour too appealing, people will never set sail from their safe harbour. And I'd be really interested in Des's take on that. But if I was advising an organisation, I'd be saying stick to the letter of the ACOP, because you're not going to be sued if you stick to the letter of the ACOP. So that makes what's in the ACOP really important. And so we need those ACOPs to represent good health and safety practice, not minimum health and safety practice. And that's going to require, I think, a capability improvement from WorkSafe, because a lot of their recent guidance hasn't been hot, to be honest with you.
Jeff, a couple of double-ended questions for you specifically. I mean, you obviously, as the CEO of NZISM, you call on a number of your members on a regular occasion to support putting a submission in. See, Andy, pulling submissions together, providing guidance, providing advice. I mean, what are you seeing out there in terms of people's willingness to provide support? I guess on a number of occasions voluntarily. Is that want from industry or individuals still there to provide that kind of support?
Yeah, absolutely. People become health and safety professionals and become NZISM members because they want to keep people safe and make things better. And I'm seeing, when we did our survey of what we think needs to change with the Act and the regs, we had more than 1,300 people complete it. That's a good chunk of the health and safety profession in New Zealand saying this is what we think needs to happen. And we've had great support and feedback on our submissions, on the reforms, on engineered stone. It's a real luxury as NZISM CEO to just be able to reach out to smart folks and say, hey, what do you think about that, and get their help. So I think there's a real desire to help with this stuff. If we can help WorkSafe do better guidance, I want to lean into that stuff. I think there's real value to the profession into New Zealand in that.
To wrap up this topic, because I am cognizant of time, and I know you've got a real job to go to, Jeff. so one of my, while there's a great want from the industry to support these type of initiatives, one thing that kind of came across my mind suddenly is, is there a risk by using individuals or groups of individuals, industries, etc., to give their time? Is there not a risk that this may go down the same road as, say, like and I don't know if I'm drawing a long bow here, but like an ISO standard where suddenly ACOPs become charged for, or to try and recoup the costs of producing publication by these industry groups, and I guess there's some risk with that, right? So what's your thoughts on that crazy idea?
Yeah, interesting you raised that, Brenton, because I've always been a little bit skeptical of the use of international standards for general health and safety duties. The workers can't look at them unless they spring their $600-700. They're not really accessible. So I've been encouraging NZISM members to work more on work-safe guidance and less on standards, at least for those general health and safety things. I accept there's probably a role for standards in really specific technical risks, like electrical safety, for example. I think, I don't know the WorkSafe Act well enough, but I think there's a requirement for them to have that stuff available freely. So pay to play and charging for guidance, we'd resist that really strongly, because people need to all understand and agree on the risks and how to address them. So I'm not worried about it yet, but maybe I'll start worrying about it now. You've given me another thing to worry about, Brenton.
Oh, classic! No, fantastic. Des, any final thoughts on the ACOPs, and your thoughts on how you might use that in your line of work?
Final thoughts on ACOPs is this idea that it's going to be pushed out to industry to develop them, but industry's already been substantially involved in developing them. So I don't see that change is going to result in anything meaningful. It's the resourcing of the change that needs to happen, and I don't see any announcements in that space. Yeah,
no, great words of wisdom there, Des. So, gentlemen, I mean, that kind of brings us to the end of a really high level. And I mean, we all agreed before we went live, we could probably spend all day really pulling these to pieces. And I don't know if the wants there and the needs there, maybe people can let us know in the chat, do we need to do, should we do some bonus episodes or special shows on each of these topics? And I don't know, maybe we can call upon Jeff again to provide his insight. But just wrapping it up, I mean, Jeff, I am still struggling to honestly see how these 4 proposed changes, reforms, roadmaps, whatever bloody spin you want to put on it, I'm really struggling to see how, if the current HASWA Act is interpreted and applied how I believe it should be, how this is actually much of a change or difference. So just wrapping up this great show today, what's your final thoughts for people on the proposed changes?
Yeah, 2 things. I think you're right, Brenton, that hopefully these changes aren't going to represent a major going backwards on health and safety. I'm a bit worried about that small business change is probably the one that has the most potential to go awry, and maybe the critical risk change. But for us, and we said this in our press release, this is a missed opportunity. We should be playing catch up with the Aussies. We should be playing catch up with the UK. And rather than going forwards, we think we're going to be at best standing still with these changes. So we're going to keep advocating for things that we think are going to turn the dial on health and safety. And there's a long road ahead of us in terms of I think the minister wants to pass law next year, and there'll be submission processes, there'll be chances to influence. In the meantime, we'll better and talking to the rest of the system to make sure that we get good outcomes. What we need from health and safety professionals is to do the same, really, to keep talking about what works, and to keep trying to get in the ears of decision makers and people who can affect that change.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I mean, I just suddenly it just suddenly dawned on me. I'm already the laughing stock of my my work team. I report into and work with a great bunch of Aussies. I'm now possibly become even more of a laughing stock when they cotton on to what may be happening. Des, your final wrap up and thoughts on the reforms, proposed changes. Pig and lipstick or what, mate? What are you thinking?
Well, my final wrap up's less about the reforms and more about the philosophy that we've been talking about today, and maybe something that Andy's EMA class can help us with. If a tree falls uncontrolled in the woods, where recreational activities are happening nearby, is the landowner required to notify the incident to WorkSafe?
Wow. I just want to apologise, Jeff, on behalf of the Circus of Safety, or myself, really, about what you just heard there. But yeah, thanks. Listen, thanks for that insightful bit of, I'm not sure what that is, Des. But yeah, listen, a big shout out. So apparently Andy Evans, one of the co-hosts, the reason for jumping off is he is currently educating the future of the profession. Well, maybe not the future, because most of them are probably qualified already. They're just trying to expand their knowledge. But yeah, a big shout out to the current EMA diploma course, currently sitting and listening live to this. So, but firstly, listen, Jeff, mate, appreciate you're a busy man. I know the phone's been ringing red hot. We're disorganised and came in at the last minute. I just want to thank you so much for your time to contribute to what no doubt is an important conversation that needed to be had.
Yeah, thanks, gents. It's been a pleasure.
Des, anything exciting for you planned over the next couple of weeks?
Well, I believe we've been recording a few New Zealand Journal of Health and Safety Practice article interviews with the authors, and so we should hopefully be able to push those out over the coming weeks, which is a bit exciting.
Yep, no, fantastic. And yeah, look forward to kind of having hopefully some downtime in my life as well, as I get on top of a few things and bits and pieces. So listen, I'm not quite sure what's happened to my graphics that I normally use, but until the next time, take care, and thanks for tuning in.